So,
Okay, first of all, I apologize to the council for being late. I did get a message of 9:30, so that's why I wasn't here till 9:30. I was privileged to serve on the search committee for the executive director for the school. And the first step in that process, I think you have all gone through this first two steps that I'm gonna just quickly go through here. On March 11th, which was not even 2 months ago now, we received for the first time a spreadsheet showing the candidates who had advanced to the third level of screening. They had to meet all the minimum requirements. Can you hear me, Steve?
yeah, thank you.
At step 3 of screening, the candidates were scored based on their qualifications, their experiences and competencies that the school board, teachers, and staff noted were critical for success during the job analysis phase. Candidates who did not pass step 2 were not included in the first step, in the first spreadsheet, which was color-coded, basically showed a series of pieces of information, color-coded and divided into those who had earned 80% or more of the possible points, and down to 70 to 79% and so forth, so that you had a sense of what the developmental associates had, how they had viewed these candidates. You had all the backup information, not only on those candidates, but also on the ones that had not passed muster. So there was a whole lot of information to go through. We had the application itself, the full resume, a cover letter if they included that. Anything that they had included with the application was available to us online. It's all very well done. You can just sit at your computer and read through it all. We were to meet on March 14th. That was 3 days later, having had to go through all of these resumes. And we did, I think there were just short of 60 resumes that initially came in. We had, I think there were 40, but we had the full spreadsheet on. And the goal on March 14th was to come up with 15 candidates that we had. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you've all been through that, right?
Yeah, we're doing the.
That's where
14th.
we are now.
We're right here.
So we were to identify the 15 candidates that we believe should be moved on to the next level of screening. Let me just make sure I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so we met on March 14th, and we discussed for 3 hours the resumes and all of that we had a chance to go through. And we put our list of 15 together. And what happened at that point was that representatives from developmental associates, actually it was the same person, which was important because then it was the same person evaluating all 15 of the candidates, had a phone interview with each of them, which probably lasted 15 to 20 minutes. And then there was a written assessment that they were asked to complete, which I think had 4 different questions. And some of them chose to sit at the computer and do it because the time that it took them to complete that written assessment was attached to the assessment itself. So for some people it was 10 minutes. You know, they were the people that had sat down separately, away from the computer, written out their questions, and then had just gone and typed it at the... So everybody had a chance to think about these and to write them down. The search committee received all of that information. I won't say they weren't transcripts of the phone conversations, but they were recaps and summaries of questions that had been asked and answers that had been given. And we also had the responses to the written assessments that had been asked for. So at this point we had a lot of information and we were beginning to, you start to evaluate and decide, okay, and you sort of start to rank them. But at that point, the next thing we had to do was to get down to 6 candidates. And we did that, I don't remember what day it was, but it was maybe a week later. So we had all of this new information to look at in conjunction with what we already had, and we narrowed that list down to 6 people who were then invited to the campus for 2 days of exercises. One of the candidates dropped out. One of the ones that we went to, one of the 6, said he did not feel he could, what was the word? That he didn't have the energy to go through that kind of process. So it was good we knew that. We had identified 2 backup candidates, and the first one was called. He accepted, but before he got to campus, he accepted another job, which was sort of a problem for us, because we knew that our candidates, this is the time people are out looking. It's almost the close of the school year, so if they're going to be switching jobs, it's the time to be looking at that opportunity. So we had 5 come to campus. The first thing that happened was there was an open house. I think it was from 5 to 6:30 on a Wednesday evening. And it was an opportunity to see each of them in a sort of a social environment, how comfortable they were. It wasn't a time for us to be grilling them about the job, but to just ask, let them ask questions. There were parents there was the community at large, there were lots of volunteers who have been interested in this process. And so it was very healthy, and it was just another aspect of the candidate that you had an opportunity to look at. Following that, on Thursday and Friday, we had 2 days of exercises. It was a relatively, what could have been perhaps an uncomfortable thing happened, because all of the candidates were together and competing directly head-on with each other, and it was probably a little awkward for them, but it didn't appear awkward. We all sort of had breakfast together in a room to begin with. The people on the search team were there. We had around 15 what we called raters or observers who were going to be sitting in on the exercises. We had 5 exercises planned during those 2 days. Just quickly, there was a presentation that they were going to speak to, or present, that they did have an opportunity to think about beforehand. This wasn't going to be on the spot. It was, the question had to do with providing a quality classical education. At the same time, you've got special needs kids in your class. How does that work? What would you say are the challenges and opportunities for that kind of a process? And so we had 3 or 4 observers who listened to the presentation. A second exercise was an interview. These were probably 6 or 7 questions asked on the spot. They had no idea what they were going to be. So it was sort of a test on how quickly can you think on your feet, how good are you at... They weren't questions that they should not have anticipated. There shouldn't have been any real surprises. Again, there were observers and raters watching all of that and making notes. We had classes for the raters on what was important for them to pay attention to. If you can, forget all your prejudices and try to evaluate each candidate, squarely and fairly. And the third exercise was a role play with an underperforming teacher. I happened to be in that exercise, so there was a teacher sitting at a desk, and the candidate came in as the director, and it was an opportunity to see what kind of skills they had with dealing with an underperforming person, and were they collaborative, were they forthcoming in asking for solutions from the individual, as well as trying to provide guidance for it was a very eye-opening exercise, and probably, I think, one of the more difficult. There was a second role play with a board member and 2 teachers, as well as the director, and I wasn't part of that exercise. I don't really remember what the issue was, but it was trying to move the school forward. I don't remember exactly what issue they were talking about, but it all had to do with moving the school forward. And then there was a written assessment where they were given a question and to see what kind of grammar and punctuation and spelling skills they had. And you'd be surprised. Some of the candidates applying for director had trouble with grammar and punctuation and spelling. Anyway, obviously that was only one of the exercises and perhaps not the most important. So each of the search committee members participated in one of these exercises. And as I said, there were roughly 15 raters, maybe 3 or 4 in each exercise. At the conclusion of getting everybody through all 5 exercises by noon on Friday, the search committee then met and discussed exercise by exercise, we brought all the raters in and the people who had observed the exercise and asked them questions, listened to what their observations had been, made our notes. We went through that for all 5 exercises. And then we sat down and we discussed, okay, let's rate these 5 candidates. And we all rated the same 2 candidates, either first or second. We sat down and discussed further and reached consensus on the final choice. Why do this? I know it costs money, but it is a rigorous process. It is an opportunity to observe candidates from many different perspectives. There is lots of input from a variety of parents, teachers, volunteers, other board members who were part of this whole exercise program. It's interesting, your mind can change as you go through this process as a member of the search team. You know, you sort of make your early, I don't mean you make your final evaluations, but you can't help but sort of, okay, I like what he did, I like what she did over there. But your mind changes if you watch all the different qualities that you're asking them to show you. It's a transparent process, it's an inclusive process, and I believe we got the best leader for the school that we possibly could have found. And if anybody's got any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
You were a rater as well as a decision maker.
I was.
Can you?
I was a rater in one exercise, not all of them.
Okay. We've struggled with the fact of participation in this. Do you have advice, or can you not be part of the assessment rating process and still be a decision maker? In other words, can that be separated? Because right now, we don't have any of us who are planning on being an assessor.
Oh, I think that's a mistake.
Okay.
I mean, we had 3 board members on the search team, and all of the search team, some of whom were not board members, were a rater or an observer in an exercise.
How many people were how many decision
There were 6
makers?
people on the search team.
Search team,
And
6.
there were 3 board members. Now, we have an 11-member board, so it wasn't, I mean, here there's, 4 council members, but clearly I think council members, 1 or 2 at least, need to be
Right.
on the search team. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know if developmental associates would have a different take on it, but, we had a woman whose specialty was finding educators, executive directors for schools. Obviously, there's a different process here, and you'll have a municipal government person, I'm sure, will be their specialty. But she was very knowledgeable, and she initially suggested that the raters not come to the social hour, and I questioned that because, first of all, I'm on the search team, and we'd already had all this information about their resumes, their cover letters, their phone conversations, so we already knew a lot about them. To be in a social gathering was just another opportunity to see another side of who they were and how comfortable they were. And, I mean, being an ambassador for the town is a big part of the job for the town manager. Got to have good communication skills, good social interaction, comfortable with people. So I felt it was valuable, and she changed her opinion on that. So it's a give and take process. None of it's cast in concrete. They're very easy to work with. They do a tremendous amount of work. I couldn't get over the amount of work that they had to do to set up all these exercises. And it was really quite incredible.
If I might, I'm sorry.
Sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
If I might, if none of us are there to view the assessments at the different stations or exercises, and I assume that'll be our top 5 or 6 that go through that.
Right.
In the end, we will receive the results of those assessments. And then by virtue of not having been able to observe them, we'll have to make decisions. And then I assume we would had the opportunity to conduct our own interviews with the folks. I would hope,
I would suggest you discuss that with
yeah,
the developmental,
Yeah.
because it wasn't part of our process.
Right.
But,
I guess through your assessments, now you had people, but as part of the search team, part of the board, and some served as assessors or raters also. So you had 15 assessors or raters, 5 exercises, so I assume that's 3 per exercise station
yeah, some of them has 4, so it's between
Yeah,
15
okay.
and 20 observers.
over a period of 2 days. At the end of the assessment period, was it all the assessors together that reached that consensus on the top applicant? Or was it just the board members,
It was just the search team.
the search team
Six-
only?
6 people, right. But we
Okay.
had met with all of the observers for each exercise.
Right, okay. So that search team came to a consensus on top applicant, and that's what was presented to the board?
Correct.
And the board agreed, or?
Board approved.
Okay.
And the offer was extended and the offer was accepted.
Okay.
In our situation, Mary Ann and I can do it. So we'd have 2 out of the 5. I don't know if, I know you definitely are out, right, Steve?
Well,
Yeah,
Steve
I'll be
wanted
on the
to.
way to Maryland on that day,
Okay.
the 2nd of June. I'll be en route to Maryland, so. And I wanted very much to be there to be part of that process and observe it.
It's,
And
In
one
this-
thing that's driving going ahead with the June 2nd, 3rd date as opposed to later is the summer period and other people looking for the jobs too. I mean, we might lose some top candidates if we wait longer, but, I don't know. That's,
right.
The search team for the school was made up, were there any board members on the search team?
3 out of the 6.
3 out of the 6, okay.
Now, one of those board members was also a parent, has 3 children in the school.
Okay,
There were 2 teachers and one, the administrative director at the school.
okay.
did you have another question?
I'm just trying to get my head around who participated and who the assessors were.
The assessors were made up mainly of parents, let me think a little. There were a couple of board members who served as assessors. Nobody served as an assessor in more than one exercise, so they were always, if you served as an assessor, it was just on one exercise.
Now, if you were serving as an assessor for that exercise, did you actually rate all of the candidates on that particular, okay, I got it. So it's not
No,
piecemeal.
You're
You-
always rating the same
Okay.
exercise, so you get to see each candidate go through the same process.
That is reasonable. You don't see them in the other situations, but
No,
you see all of
rely
them
on
in the
their-
one you
and you're
observe.
gonna rely on the assessors, who have seen each candidate go through their exercise.
Yeah, and I understood that when I talked to Heather and Steve Strauss before, is I would, if I was there, I would only see all of the candidates at one station. Or
Right.
one, yeah, not all the candidates all there. But, were any former teacher or current teachers involved in that
Yes.
assessment? And,
Yes.
or former
I-
school directors from
I'm
another?
sorry, on the search team, there was a teacher.
Yeah.
Who did I? Oh, I said 2 teachers.
Two teachers.
Oh, okay,
There
okay.
were 2 teachers.
Okay.
And the other,
On a scale of 1 to 10, if you can possibly do it based on the assessment process, how much subjectivity of the assessors is involved in that process as opposed to objectivity?
some, I think, probably because we're all human, but they sit you down for an hour and a half and really talk you through how to try to eliminate those kinds of subjective biases that you have. Matter of fact, the person from Developmental Associates told us a funny story about, she was interviewing a candidate for something or she was overseeing the process, and she went to pick the candidate up, and she said immediately, oh, well, she's not gonna work out. And what happened was, this woman had so much makeup on that she just, I forget what the position was for, it was obviously in the education field. But she knocked every exercise out of the park, and she came to realize that this was a stupid, bias on her part. And as it turns out, the woman, I've forgotten why she had reasons for, I don't remember, but it was an interesting thing to listen to. And she said on every single exercise, she was actually eventually the candidate chosen.
Yeah.
So you do have to try hard to get rid of that. But I don't know, as you watch people going through these exercises, somehow it's sort of easy to let go of some of that. You're trying to be as objective as you can. You don't say a word. You just sit there and take notes. So in our particular exercise, we were watching this interaction between the teacher and the director. And some things become very clear as you watch.
Did you ever feel in the process that the organization might be pushing one or two particular candidates out of favoritism?
Trying to think about that question, and I can't say that I remember one comment when we were trying to come up with our top candidates, and we had picked, we picked our 6, and then we wanted 3 backups. And so we picked 3 backups, and as I say, one of the 6 candidates we chose initially dropped out, didn't want to go through all that rigorous process. The first backup we called, accepted initially, and then had gotten a job offer. And at that point, it was really too late to call somebody else because there needed to be a presentation put together, and it wouldn't have been fair to. We were now 2 days away from the exercises beginning, so we just went with the 5 candidates. And she said, we've worked with the person from Developmental Associates, and we've worked with less than, we've had 3 candidates come, so 5 is a very reasonable number.
Right.
Don't worry about not having 6. But one of the things she did say to me when it was all over, and she said, the person you had in 3rd place as your 3rd backup candidate I would have had to come forward. And she said, I just don't think it would have been a good fit for the school. Now, she never said a word about that until the whole thing was all over. So they have their own thoughts about things because they've come to know these candidates pretty well. But I can't remember, there was no pressure anywhere whatsoever.
Okay.
To what extent do you think they have had the same candidates go through the same process before for other positions, that they know things we would not know about why perhaps somebody else turned them down?
Probably true. They probably do. They go through this a lot, so they
Yeah.
probably have. But they don't, honestly, there's nothing that's ever been said that I recall, ever. And we were all together, so
But it was after the fact.
it was after the fact, and it wasn't one of our first choices anyway. And we
So
never
the process-
we never did call that person.
The
because
process worked.
The process worked. It's a lot of work. I won't tell you it's not. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of data to go through. Now at times you think, I can't read one more resume. I can't read one more. But then you think about why you're doing it.
Well, at each station, there were how many assessors?
In the role play, we had three people watching and observing, but then there was another person who was playing the teacher. So there were 4 in that particular exercise. She wasn't an observer. She did, however, rate. She was a rater, but she wasn't able to take notes because she was interacting
Okay.
during the role play. But and it was interesting to watch how her behavior changed as she dealt with each of the candidates, because they offered something different, each of them. So she reacted as a normal person would. We had one candidate who was probably over accommodating. Well, she loved that. So, he was, if you've been watching that, he was pretty effective. But then you wonder now, if he'd had a very confrontational teacher who wasn't willing to listen to anything he said, then how, would he have had enough backbone perhaps to take a little harder stand with her? Because she was sort of whiny and, she was underperforming and it was everybody else's fault, it wasn't hers. But she paid attention to what the candidate was saying and sort of modified her behavior based on what she was getting from them, which was very effective and made you think about, well, he was great at that, but she was pretty nice to him. What would happen if, and I remember that candidate very well, and at the end of all the exercises, he was the least favored of all of them, because he didn't fare well in the other exercises. And it was because, and maybe I don't mean to disclose too much, and I hope I'm not, he just wasn't strong enough, and he really hadn't had to call on that skill in the exercise that we were rating, but he did have to call on that skill in other exercises. So that's what's helpful about this process, is that it sort of exposes a lot of different areas for you to evaluate and think about.
Was there any kind of were the stations or timed on the exercises, or did you have a log jam?
No, they were
somebody
timed.
back in the wait.
Some of them finished before. We didn't have to call time on any, not, in my exercise, we didn't have to call time on any.
Okay, great, all right.
But they were normally about 25 to 30 minutes. That was for us. Now, maybe the presentation wasn't that long, but they were long enough to clearly identify strengths and weaknesses.
So you didn't have Blaine speaking at one of those stations?
No.
Okay, got it.
Well, he can't make the dates anyway, so it's, we had to move it so he couldn't participate.
Got it.
Well, are those dates cast in stone?
No, here's what they said, because we tried to accommodate Steve, because he was the only one that really said, I want to be there. And so I asked to move him to the following week, and they said they couldn't do that, and it would probably mean we'd have to move into July, and you're probably gonna lose a lot of candidates if we did that.
I didn't get that, Bob, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I thought when I read that email, is they said that if you wait until the latter part of June, then you might, but I meant if we could do it before the 15th. It seemed like that next week was open to them. The very next week, it seemed like was open
Okay.
from your email.
I'll double check, and we'll have Heather here on
Right.
next
Right, we'll
week.
see her Monday, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I think we should try to work it such that we could be
I'd love
involved.
to be there.
And I would too, it's just that it's
I
it's
mean,
just
my
something-
wife.
Well, it would be a shame to lose Dr. Cox.
Well,
I can make it right after that, but the third was out for me.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I'm gonna be gone the 2nd through the 4th, maybe the 5th. My wife will be coming back home with me from Maryland. She's flying back from Vietnam, and I've been glad to get out of the house that following week for this.
She's gonna get you out of the house. Before he's thrown out.
That's right.
Well, let's fool
yeah.
around with those dates.
All right.
One final question I have is, the purpose of this is they say is that you can only pick up so much through looking at resumes and cover letters and all that. Did you witness that? I mean, were you like, you thought so highly of this one person and they turned out to be just,
The most helpful thing are the exercises, I have to be honest. I mean, they were just, you see so many different, things when you're watching an interaction. And I thought the open house was very helpful, where we had a chance to meet them socially. Even sitting in having breakfast. I mean, we sort of flowed in before the exercises officially started. People would come in, go out, and it was very informal. And I think that is the most valuable part of it, honestly. The hardest part was the very first part, where you go through all those resumes, and you can clearly see right away, some people that just, you wonder why they've even submitted the resume, but there it is. So it's a healthy, rigorous process, and it's enjoyable, but it's work.
okay, any other questions?
I don't, thank you. I mean, from my
Thank you.
perspective, thank you very much.
I
Thank you
appreciate
so
the
much.
opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good, Linda,
Sorry
thank you.
I was late.
No, no,
We
no.
know-
Thank
we know
you.
whose
That was
fault
my
was.
problem, that was my fault.
We confess it's all.
We're blaming on Woody, though. Okay, we want to move into closed session in accordance with GS 143-318-11.
I'll make that motion.
11. Pardon?
I'll make that motion.
Well,
Okay.
you got to state it, I believe the whole
Okay,
thing.
A6, for the purpose of discussing personnel matters, to review the applicants for town manager, and also, while we're in that session, that we would
Move, yeah.
a closed session from accordance with GS 143-318.11A3 for attorney-client privilege to discuss litigation between the town of Lake Lure and Eisen Brown Self Jones et al. Do I hear a motion now, Bob?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Bob, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You need to take 5 more minutes, you want to just,
I don't care, it's up to everybody else. I'm fine
I'll
either
just
way.
get some coffee and reach in.
I am flexible. Sometimes.